Verse 1. Do not rejoice, O Israel, with joy like other peoples. Do not rejoice. In Hebrew, al tismach, which is interesting because, well, al is no, but in Hebrew, most of the time, no appears as lo. Yet sometimes the word appears backwards. So the same two letters, but with the last first. And this is one of those cases, which is just like El. It is written just like Mighty One. El, Aleph, Lamed. So one way of translating this could be the Almighty will rejoice, or will make you rejoice. Yet the correct translation would be do not rejoice, telling Israel not to rejoice. Israel comes after. But my point, which is interesting here, is the fact that it says tismach, which is from the verb samach, he rejoiced, or from the noun simcha, joy. And that is interesting also because the word yismach, which is he will rejoice, when we rearrange the letters, we get the word Mashiach. So Mashiach, Messiah, is the one who makes us rejoice. So he who believes in the true Messiah will rejoice, because he who believes in Mashiach, he is Mach. Yet Yahweh is telling the many not to rejoice, which would be because they don't have the true Mashiach, so they cannot Yismach. So do not rejoice, O Israel, with joy like other peoples, for you have played the harlot against your Elohim. We see there the connection, the clear connection with the great harlot of Babylon in the book of Revelation, like those who have followed the false Messiah. For you have played the harlot against your Elohim. You have made love for hire on every threshing floor. You have made love for hire on every threshing floor. The threshing floor and the winepress shall not feed them, because in their congregations, which is the place where they were supposed to go and connect with the Almighty and produce joy like wine, instead they went to the threshing floor for idols, for false doctrines, for Elohim. So they drank the wine of the harlot of Babylon, which is idolatry. And that's why they will be sent to the winepress of the wrath of Yahweh in Revelation 14. The threshing floor and the winepress shall not feed them, and the new wine shall fail in her. And the new wine shall fail in hers. In the sense of their doctrine, which is new because it's not that of old, is not the one from eternity, but something which they made in the past 2,000 years, even less. So it will fail. Their faith will fail, and they will be confused. And if we were to see the new wine as the second coming, as I have always explained, also the old wine and the new wine as first and last, and the new wine shall fail her, in the sense that they won't accept the doctrine that the last brings. So to them, he will fail them. To them, that doctrine fails the test that they put it through. So, verse 3. They shall not dwell in Yahweh's land, but Ephraim shall return to Egypt, and shall eat unclean things in Ashur. So they will return to idolatry and end up eating the falsehood of the New World Order. Obviously, many of the many. Also, when the many die and resurrect, well, when we enter the promised land for eternity, Yahweh will extend the borders of Israel, and they will go all the way to Egypt. So that would be another way in which this could be interpreted, in the sense that many of the many of Israel who are right now in the apostasy will be in the further part of the land. Then it says, and Ephraim shall return to Egypt, and shall eat unclean things in Ashur. They shall not offer wine offerings to Yahweh. They shall not offer wine offerings to Yahweh, nor shall their sacrifices be pleasing to him, as we were written in the previous chapter. They make sacrifices both in Judaism and in Christianity. They have their own sacrifices. Jewish people want to go and sacrifice animals in the Temple Mount. Christians sacrifice their money, sacrifice, I don't know what else they sacrifice. Well, there are certain things that they call sacrifices. And I mean, mainly talking about, obviously, the worst doctrines in which the worst pastors are teaching falsehood and many people are following blindly. So they sacrifice many things that are not for Yahweh. They may be sacrificing those things for themselves, to feel better about themselves, sacrificing those things for their pastors, or to get a new job, or to get a partner, or whatever. They shall not offer wine offerings to Yahweh. They won't rejoice with Yahweh for who he is. They will not rejoice with him. They want to rejoice away from him. They want to rejoice because of what he may give them, but not with him, not in him. They shall not offer wine offerings to Yahweh, nor shall their sacrifices be pleasing to him. It shall be like bread of mourners to them. So the truth, which is the bread of life, to them is like the bread of mourners, bread of sadness, because they have turned the truth into a lie by worshiping a false Messiah through their false doctrine. So it shall be like bread of mourners to them. All who eat it shall be defiled. This is amazing. So the false doctrine that they created, instead of being the bread of life, is bread of mourners. And those who eat that doctrine, even though they think they are being spiritual and they are becoming good people and whatever, it's actually defiling them, because in certain ways, to certain people, obviously those who are not true to Yahweh and to themselves, they end up getting worse, because they end up feeling better than others, greater than others, more important, and a bunch of other things. So they end up being lukewarm, like the congregation of Laodicea. Not cold when they were in sin, not hot by searching the consuming fire, but in the middle, because they claim to believe, but they don't actually know what they believe. So they don't do what they are supposed to, but believe to be better than those who are not doing anything. So they shall not offer wine offerings to Yahweh, nor shall their sacrifices be pleasing to him. It shall be like bread of mourners to them. All who eat it shall be defiled, for their bread shall be for their own life. All who eat it shall be defiled, for their bread shall be for their own life. It shall not come into the house of Yahweh, for their bread shall be for their own life. One thing is that, well, to take from this, is the fact that they, whatever they do, and when I say they, I repeat, I mean the many who are either being fooled or fooling themselves. sadly, but many are in that category. So when they do things and they think it's spiritual, they actually do it for that which is material. So they are not searching for spiritual food, they are searching for physical food. So their bread shall be for their own life. Also, the fact that obviously their bread, that of mourners, which they have followed and believed, will become their death. So their breath will be for their lives. It shall not come into the house of Yahweh. So they will not be able to enter as part of the few who are the temple of Yahweh. For Yahushua is the cornerstone, and the 144,000 are each a stone, which will be the temple. But those who do not accept the name cannot be part of the temple. So, for their bread shall be for their own life, it shall not come into the house of Yahweh. Their bread, which is not the bread of life, will not be able to enter the house of Yahweh, because only the bread of life will be able to enter the house of Yahweh. What will you do in the appointed day? What will you do in the appointed day? Here it says, starts with ma, which is a word that means what mainly, and it represents the second coming, while me represents the first coming. Me in Hebrew means who. So me means who, ma means what. Me and ma represent first and last. So here it says, what will you do? Then it says, Leyom Moed, the special day, the appointed day, the day that Yahweh decided upon, one of those days of Leviticus 23, for instance. 8 days in which Yahweh told us to celebrate something and be prepared for something. 4 of those 8 days have been fulfilled already. We still have 4 to go with the manifestation of the 2 witnesses. And then it says, and on the day of the feast of Yahweh. What will you do in the appointed day and in the day of the feast of Yahweh? Here the word for feast is Chag, which is connected to Haggai, the prophet. In Haggai, he makes reference to Sukkot and Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a reflection, a mirror or shadow of Sukkot. So it's interesting that it says, what will you do on the appointed day, as making reference to Yom Kippur, when the last is being killed, and in the day of the feast of Yahweh, which would be Sukkot, the second Exodus, fleeing to the mountains, as Yahushua said in Matthew 24, Luke 17, and Mark 13. So the Ma, which represents the last, who is killed on the Moed of Yom Kippur, would be represented in this first part of the verse. And then the second Exodus in the second part. And Yahweh is asking the people, what will you do when the 2 witnesses are killed? People are supposed to be suffering for the 2 witnesses, because what they mean to the congregation, and therefore should mean to those who claim to believe in the Almighty and Scriptures, and also because it's the day of Yom Kippur, the day which Yahweh said that people should afflict their souls because of what will be fulfilled in that day. So Yahweh is asking them, what will you do in the appointed day? Most likely they will celebrate, as it is written in Revelation 11. And in the day of the feast of Yahweh, the few will flee to the mountains, away from the cities, mainly, that's the point, away from wherever they may be found. Then it says, for indeed they are gone because of destruction. So the many will be gone because of destruction during those 30 days that would start with Sukkot, as I have explained previously. For indeed they are gone because of destruction. Egypt shall gather them up. So the false religion, the false doctrine will gather them up for the supposed rapture, when they will be killed during 30 days. The false religion, the great harlot of Babylon, as Egypt in this case, is going to fool everybody to accept the mark of the beast, and those who do not accept it will be gathered up to be killed. in 30 days, like Hosea 5:7. For indeed they are gone because of destruction. Egypt shall gather them up. Memphis shall bury them. Nettles shall possess their valuables of silver. Thorns shall be in their tents. Their tents are their bodies. Thorns, as in what will pierce them and kill them because of their sins, which are represented by thorns. For thorns came out of plants when Adam sinned. And I'm going to see these names very quick in verse 6. So, as we know, Egypt spiritually means the land of affliction, representing this world. Literally, pretty much means the land of two limits, two borders, as representing this world, which has a beginning and an end, two limits. Memphis means haven of the good. Nettles, nettles shall they possess, as in, like the thorns of the end. So it was the names Egypt and Memphis, and with the whole verse, but using the meanings instead of the names, we would get, for indeed they are gone because of destruction. The land of the two limits, the land of affliction, shall gather them up. And the haven of the good, the place where they previously found good or thought was good, shall be possessed by nettles and rent by thorns, pretty much. So those who are sinners as thorns and nettles will take over that which was in the hands of the many. Verse 7. And the fact that it says Memphis shall bury them is that the place in which they were trusting, the place which they thought was good, is the one that is going to turn against them. And not only place, but the people, the doctrine, the religion, the leader, etc. will turn against them, where they thought they would found their own good. Instead, they will get thorns, just like they gave Messiah thorns on his head. Verse 7. The days of punishment have come. The days of punishment have come. The days of recompense have come. That is a blessing for those who have followed Yahweh, because they will get the reward and will see the revenge of Yahweh against their enemies. Yet those who are enemies of Yahweh should be crying and repenting, for the days of punishment have come. The days of recompense have come. Israel knows. That is amazing. Israel knows, because there are, Israel, at least those who are the true Israel, even if they are among the nations and do not know that they are Israel, they know deep in their heart that the end is coming. They know that everything will manifest. They don't know how because they don't read scriptures, but spiritually in their heart they know. Many of them try to hide it, try to mute that word or that voice that tells them, but they know. Israel knows. Then it says the prophet is a fool. Like nowadays, pretty much those who call themselves prophets end up showing themselves as fools when they prophesy things that don't happen, for instance. Or the fact that most Christians prophets prophesied that everything's going to be fine, that everything's going to get better, that this and that, instead of prophesying what scripture says will happen. Just like they used to do back in the day. And only one prophet in a generation would actually dare to speak against hundreds of prophets that would be saying only good things. And obviously, Yahweh has good things for those who love him. But other than that, the days of punishment have come. So Israel knows the prophet is a fool. The spiritual man is insane. This is great in two ways. The negative, there are a lot of people who claim to be spiritual, but they're just insane because they connect with a demon. So they actually act possessed, or the things they say are insane. But on the other hand, since everybody has become so material, so of the flesh, those who are truly spiritual appear as insane to the rest. For it is written that the good news of the kingdom are, well, depending on the translation, but are pretty much what makes those who are getting lost see us as crazy. So they think we are crazy for what we believe in. And that is very important because that is in the new covenant, and here we are seeing it in the old covenant, that those who are spiritual for following Mashiach would be seen as insane by the rest of the people. And I repeat, also in the negative sense, the point is that in this world, because of the thousands of false doctrines, there are a lot of people who are spiritual but are connected to a negative spiritual entity. Therefore, they become insane. So the prophet is a fool. The spirit man is insane because of the greatness of your iniquity and great enmity. So because of the greatness of the iniquity of the people, they see a spiritual man as insane because they don't understand. They're so far from being spiritual. And on the other hand, since the people have gone so far from the true spirit, they have connected with a false spirit and have become truly insane. Verse 8. The watchman of Ephraim is with my Elohim. This is important. The watchman of Ephraim, as I have said, the prophet like Moshe comes as a watchman, as a messenger of Mashiach, well, of Yahweh through Mashiach. And he is with Yahweh through Mashiach because Mashiach Yahushua is Emmanuel, Elohim with us. So the last through the first is with Yahweh as the watchman who came from Ephraim. The watchman of Ephraim is with my Elohim. Verse 8. Sofe Ephraim im Elohei. Im Elohei. As in Emmanuel. Then it says, the watchman of Ephraim is with my Elohim, but the prophet is a fowler's snare in all his ways. But those prophets of the world are trapping the people, are putting traps to the people through their words by claiming something that Yahweh didn't say, are getting into their hearts through their emotions. So that's why it says, but the prophet is a fowler's snare in all his ways. One who catches birds in a trap. It says another translation. But the prophet is one who catches birds in a trap in all his ways. The birds as the fallen angels who have given false doctrines. So through those false doctrines, they trap the people. Enmity in the house of his Elohim. Enmity in the house of his Elohim. They follow the enemy. So they have brought the doctrine of the enemy to the place which they call the house of Elohim. They claim they come, well, when they go to those places that they go to worship Elohim, yet through the doctrine that they are being taught from their pulpits, they are actually worshiping the enemy. Therefore, they become enemies. Enmity in the house of his Elohim. They are deeply corrupted. Verse 9. They are deeply corrupted, as in the days of Gibeah. He will remember their iniquity. He will punish their sins. I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. Look how it talks about grapes once again. Just like it talked about the threshing floor, the winepress. Now it talks about grapes. Because in the harvest of Revelation 14, we see how Yahweh first gathers the wheat and then the grapes. First the few and then the many. Israel represents the many. Those who still will rebel against the two witnesses, the true doctrine, and then be killed. Well, the two witnesses be killed, and then they will be killed during the 30 days of Hosea 5:7. I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness, because they are grapes of Israel that have grown in the nations, within the nations where they were scattered for their sins. I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your fathers as the first fruits of the fig tree in its first season. When Yahushua came the first time, the first season, he saw the fig tree and he cursed it, and the fig tree dried up. And that was to represent that he came to Yahudah. He came to those who were his people, but his people rejected him, as we see in John 1:11. So he came to his people rejected him. So he came to the fig tree and he saw that he had no fruit, only leaves, which represents the works of the flesh. But it didn't have fruit, which represents the actual works of faith, of the Spirit. So Yahushua cursed the tree to represent that those people who rejected him, being he their Messiah, they would be cursed through their action. So I saw your fathers, meaning 2,000 years ago, as the first fruits of the fig tree in its first season. But they went to Baal Peor. This is key, because Baal Peor is the Lord of the hole, or the Lord of the gap, or the Lord of depression. So it's connected with the spirit of error, the one that they have worshipped through the calf, the golden calf when they came out of Egypt, or the calf of Shomron mentioned in the previous chapter. That is Baal, the Lord in English. Peor, the hole, a depression. But I mentioned that word because it is a spirit that puts the soul in a hole. So you feel depressed, you feel empty. And that's whom they have been worshiping. But they went to Baal Peor after Yahushua came, cursed the fig tree because they killed him. He left, and then they kept worshiping Baal. So they went to Baal Peor and separated themselves to that shame and dedicated themselves to that shame. So for 2,000 years, the people who claim to believe in the Most High and in the scriptures, they have dedicated themselves actually to shame, to Baal Peor. They became an abomination like the thing they loved. They loved idols. They are abominations. They became like the idols, so they will be abominations. They think that idols are nice, so they will be like the idols. That's why I always say that people will pretty much build their own heaven or their own hell, because people choose where they are going to go, away from Yahweh and therefore away from everything that is good, or close to that which is only good. And therefore, when you understand that, you want to get closer and closer and closer and closer, because the closer you are to the Almighty, to Yahweh, through Yahushua, the better you will be for eternity. So, they became an abomination like the thing they loved. So, if we love Yahweh, we will become loved by Him and like Him. But people love a false Messiah, false doctrine. So they become an abomination because they worship the abomination of desolation, who will appear and claim to be the Almighty on earth. So they became an abomination like the thing they loved. So that shows how they actually love the abomination of desolation, which is the false Messiah, the Antichrist, the true Antichrist. And that is something very important. I repeat it a lot, but I think it's very important that we understand it, and also for those who may watch for the first time, that the God of this world, as everybody knows, is Satan. And he has made sure that everybody follows a false doctrine and therefore a false Messiah. So when the false Messiah appears, known as Antichrist, to most people will be actually the Christ, because that's how upside down everything is. So that's why they will become an abomination like what they loved, because they love the abomination of desolation, which is the Antichrist, and that is key. So that's why also Yahweh says that he had to shorten the times, because what the enemy is preparing to deceive the world is so huge, so amazing, that if Yahweh doesn't shorten the times, even the chosen few would be deceived. But since he will shorten the times, the chosen few won't be deceived. But that is chosen few. So that means that for the many it will be very hard, and that's why they will end up dying, because they will realize it way too late, that the one that they thought was the Messiah actually is the Antichrist. As for Ephraim, their honor shall fly away like a bird. So Ephraim will lose their honor, in which they are right now, because a lot of Christianity has gained a lot of power. I mean, many denominations, mainly Catholic and Christian, they both have gained popularity and riches throughout the past 2,000 years, but they will lose it all in a moment. Also, another way of seeing this is that the true honor or splendor of Israel, or Ephraim even, are the few, those who are within them but are actually chosen. Once the chosen few are taken away through the prepared place of Revelation 12, then their honor will be gone, fly away like a bird. And we see that the chosen few are given wings like an eagle to fly away from the serpent that is trying to kill them. As for Ephraim, their honor shall fly away like a bird. No birth, no pregnancy, and no conception. They cannot conceive from the seed of death, that is, as having relations while a woman is with her period. So we know that that is an abomination to the Almighty when a couple has sex during a woman's period, because the blood represents death in that time. They cannot procreate. So in the spiritual sense, the reason why that is an abomination, because it represents how people follow idols or a spirit of death, and what they will receive instead of life will be their own death. So no birth, as in they won't be transformed when the chosen few are reborn through the transformation of the harvest. But the many won't receive that, because they will have to die and then resurrect. No birth, no pregnancy, because the seed that was in them was not the seed of life, was not Yahushua. And no conception. Though they bring up their children, yet I will bereave them to the last men. Yes, woe to them when I depart from them. Listen to that, because, well, it can be seen in a couple ways. First, the obvious one, woe to them when I depart from them. When Yahweh decides to no longer hear their prayers for they already know that they shouldn't be praying that way. So Yahweh finally departs from them. Then they will feel it and be sorry. Yahweh, while they don't know, answers them, helps them, and everything. But once they know through the doctrine of the two witnesses, then they won't have an excuse. So once the two witnesses are killed, Yahweh will depart from them and they will feel it. Another way of saying it, the witness like Moshe is the second coming of Yahweh to this earth, the second manifestation, for he said, I am the first and I will be with the last. So the first and the last, when the last comes, he's killed, rejected by the many who claim to believe in the Almighty. So Yahweh says here, yes, woe to them when I depart from them. Meaning when the last departs from this world, for they killed him, rejected him, and rejected obviously his doctrine. Also, it's interesting that it says, woe to them, because there are 3 woes in Revelation. 3 woes. And one of them, the second one, is when the two witnesses go up to heaven. So when the last, who is Yahweh's second manifestation on earth, when the last departs from them, then the second woe happens, which is an earthquake that kills 7,000 people and destroys a 10th part of the city where they resurrected. So, woe to them when I depart from them. Just as I saw Ephraim like Tyre, which is Tzur in Hebrew. Tzur, which means a rock, which is a representation of Lucifer, who tries to be like the rock, the cornerstone, Yahushua. And that is because in Ezekiel 28 we see how Yahweh speaks to the king of Tyre and tells him a message that also goes to Lucifer or to Satan. So sadly, because of the false doctrine, Ephraim has followed Hillel without knowing it. Just as I saw Ephraim like Tyre, planted in a pleasant place, just like Lucifer was in the Garden of Eden, just like Hillel was in the best place, so in many ways was the Christian church in this world, in the best places. Just as I saw Ephraim like Tyre, planted in a pleasant place, so Ephraim will bring out his children to the murderer. That is amazing, sad and amazing. So Ephraim, the many, will bring out his children, the many who believe in the false doctrine, to the murderer, meaning the false Messiah. They bring their children, their people, to follow a false doctrine, thinking that they will receive life, not understanding that they are bringing them actually to their murderer, the abomination of desolation. Many will accept the world leader, the beast, and obviously also the false prophet. Verse 14. Give them, O Yahweh. What will you give? Give them a miscarrying womb and dry breasts for the rebellion. All their wickedness is in Gilgal. All their wickedness is in Gilgal. The name Gilgal connects with the second coming, or with a repetition, as in confirmation. What they did with Yahushua and Yahuhanan, the immerser, or John the Baptist, they will also do with the two witnesses, in the sense that they will kill them, reject them and kill them. Not necessarily the same way. All their wickedness is in Gilgal, for there I hated them. As in, when obviously in Gilgal there were certain things that happened that the prophet in this case is referring historically, but in the prophetical sense, being in the end times, Yahweh got angry when they rejected Messiah, obviously more than any other time in history. So all their wickedness is in Gilgal, for there I hated them, because of the evil of their deeds. I will drive them from my house. That is amazing, because as I was saying, One way in which this was fulfilled was when they rejected Messiah. And what happened 40 years later? The temple was destroyed, and Israel had to go away from Israel. So it says, all their wickedness is in Gilgal, for there I hated them because of the evil of their deeds. I will drive them from my house, as he drove them from the temple in the year 70, 40 years after they killed Messiah. I will drive them from my house. Just like also when Yahushua entered the temple, he drove them out, for they were selling animals. They were making it a place of, instead of being a place of worship and prayer, they made it a place for thieves and robbers. So he drove them out of his house. I will drive them from my house. I will love them no more. All their princes are rebellious. Their leaders, they're both spiritual and of the government, are rebellious. Ephraim is stricken. The root is dried up. As we know, Yahushua is the root of David. That is why the last, since he comes from Ephraim, and the root of Ephraim is dried up, the last has to be connected to the first, who is the root of David, who came from Yahudah, and that is not dried up. So by the first being plucked out of Ephraim and inserted into the vine, the true original olive tree, then he will be connected to the true root, which is Yahushua, the root of David. And that is how the last becomes the branch of David, by being connected to the root of David, Yahushua HaMashiach. So the root is dried up because they don't have Yahushua as their root. They have a false Messiah, a false doctrine. So that's why it is dried up. That's why they're not able to give fruit. Or if they give fruit, it's bad fruit. The root is dried up. They shall bear no fruit. Yes, were they to bear children, I would kill the darlings of the womb. This is connected to the many. And why would the Almighty Merciful would say something so harsh? Because by them having spiritual relations with the false Messiah, what they are giving birth to is evil, is an abomination. So it cannot be. So that is why anything that comes from them will be destroyed at the end, because the root is dried up, their seed is death, the bread is for mourners, etc., etc. My Elohim will cast them away, because they did not obey him. They are expecting to be taken away in a rapture. But it says here, my Elohim will cast them away, because they did not obey him. Those who believe in the rapture are not expecting to obey nothing. They are just expecting to disappear from their own places, wherever they may be at. But in the same chapter that they use for that doctrine, when it says one will be taken and one left behind, that same chapter, if you read it carefully, there is one person who actually obeys. One who is taken away and one who remains. The one who obeys does good and is saved. The one who is taken away to be killed and eaten by the vultures. And the one who remains is the one who takes the mark of the beast. All of this that I'm saying is in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 17. And it says here, my Elohim will cast them away, because they did not obey him. Yahushua says, when you see the abomination of desolation in the place where it should not be, as written by Daniel, go to the mountains, because that same night one will be taken and one will be left. 2 will be in bed, 1 will be taken, and 1 will be left. 2 will be in the field, 1 will be taken, and 1 will be left. And the disciples asked, where will they be taken? And Yahushua answered, wherever you see the vultures, there their corpses will be. So, my Elohim will cast them away, because they did not obey him. And they shall be wanderers among the nations. In the historical way, of course, Yahweh was telling us that since they rejected Yahushua HaMashiach, they would be taken out of the temple would be destroyed in the year 70, and the Israelim would go among the nations, losing their identity in false doctrines, many of them in Christianity, others in Judaism, until the end of times, when either they reject that falsehood by listening to the two witnesses who bring the true doctrine, or they will be rejected, as it says here. Elohim will cast them away because they did not obey him, and they shall be wanderers among the nations. So, that's how the chapter ends. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes for questions. I already said what Memphis means. The haven of that which is good. Hosea 9:6. At the end of the verse, is it thorns or horns? Choach. Yeah, thorns. 2 Timothy 2:19. Read it. Nevertheless, the solid foundation of Yahweh stands, having this seal. Yahweh knows those who are his, and let everyone who names the name of Mashiach depart from iniquity. That's right. And like you said, in verse 7, we read iniquity in great enmity, which shows that they don't confess the name of Mashiach. That's why they are in iniquity. And as I was saying, it is amazing. I understand, thankfully, seeing it from the point of view or our perspective. But they don't see it because of what they worship. That which they worship, or what they do, blinds them and doesn't allow them to actually understand things that are actually so simple. Is it possible that what in verse 15, let me see. All their wickedness is in Gilgal, for there I hated them, because of the evil of their deeds. I will drive them from my house, I will love them no more. All the princes are rebellious. Is it possible that what is said in verse 15 happens because they forgot that the Almighty is Kadosh, and whoever seeks him must seek to be like him? Yeah, if I am understanding the question, yeah. Yahweh drives them from his house because they did not separate themselves. They did not become Kadosh as he is Kadosh. So he had to Kadash from them, get separated from them.